The Galactic Council of Harmony was a beacon of peace amidst the chaos of the universe. For thousands of years, its coalition of member species had adhered to strict principles of nonviolence, resolving conflicts through dialogue, compromise, and mutual respect. At its heart were the Ilari, a species whose reputation for pacifism was unmatched. Their serene, translucent forms seemed almost ethereal, as if embodying their philosophy. Ilari culture revolved around the sanctity of life and the unshakable belief that all conflicts could be resolved without resorting to war. For centuries, this philosophy had held firm. The Council had mediated disputes between aggressive species, eased the scars of galactic wars, and forged alliances that seemed impossible. But that delicate balance was disrupted the day humanity entered the galactic stage. Humanity's arrival was far from subtle. Unlike most species who approached the Council with caution, humanity burst onto the scene with a mix of boldness and desperation. Their fledgling interstellar colonies had barely spread across a handful of systems before they encountered the Exalthar Dominion, one of the most feared warlike empires in the galaxy. The Exalthar saw humanity as weak, primitive, and ripe for conquest. Their fleets attacked without warning, reducing Earth's outer colonies to ashes. News of the attack reached the Council, but their response was muted. The Exalthar Dominion was not a member of the Council, and humanity, with its history of internal conflicts and wars, was viewed with suspicion. To the Council, humanity was an unpredictable species, prone to violence and incapable of the harmony the Ilari cherished. The consensus among the member species was clear: humanity was not their responsibility. If the humans and the Exalthar wished to destroy each other, it was a tragedy but not a concern for the Council. Within the crystalline chambers of the Council, the debate raged. The Ilari, as the most influential species, were expected to lead the discussion. High Mediator Lysera, the current representative of the Ilari, spoke with measured calm, reflecting her species' temperament. To intervene in this conflict, she began, her voice resonating in the luminous chamber, would mean aligning ourselves with one side against another. Such an action violates the very principles upon which this council was built. The Exalthar are aggressors, yes, but humanity is no innocent victim. Their history is one of war, division, and destruction. If we step into their conflict, we risk becoming what we despise. Her words were met with nods of agreement from the Council. The Xerics, insectoid beings known for their pragmatism, clicked their mandibles in approval. The Threnians, a reptilian species, let out low hisses of concurrence. Humanity, in their eyes, was unworthy of the Council's protection. But not all were in agreement. Within the Ilari delegation, Saren listened silently, her crystalline features unreadable. Unlike Lysera, Saren had spent decades among the stars, serving as a healer in conflict zones. She had witnessed the aftermath of war, the destruction, the suffering, the loss, and she had seen something in humanity that the others had overlooked: their capacity for resilience, for unity in the face of adversity, and for sacrifice. Saren's memories drifted to a recent mission. She had been dispatched to a neutral medical station on the fringes of human territory. The station had been overwhelmed with refugees from the Exalthar attacks, men, women, and children who had escaped with little more than their lives. Despite their suffering, the humans worked tirelessly to help one another. They shared food, comforted the grieving, and even assisted the station's overwhelmed staff. At one moment had stayed with her a young human boy no older than 10 Earth years, had given his only blanket to a shivering alien child. In that small act of kindness, Saren had seen the potential of humanity. Now, as she sat in the council chamber, Saren struggled to remain silent. The debate around her continued, each argument reinforcing the council's decision to remain neutral. But her mind was filled with the faces of those she had treated, the stories they had shared, and the undeniable truth she had witnessed: humanity, for all its flaws, was not beyond redemption. As the meeting concluded, Lysera approached Saren. "You were unusually quiet today," she remarked, her voice soft but probing. Saren hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I was listening," she replied, "and reflecting." Lysera studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. The Council's decision is clear, and we must uphold it. Neutrality is our strength, Saren. To abandon it would be to abandon ourselves." But as Lysera walked away, Saren's resolve hardened. She respected Lysera and the principles of the Alari, but she could not ignore what she had seen. Neutrality might be the Council's strength, but it was also its weakness. In the face of the Exulthur's brutality, neutrality was complicity. Saren's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a transmission. It was from a human colony, a distress call. The Exulthur had launched another attack, and the colony's defenses were failing. Saren hesitated only for a moment before making her decision. She could not stand by while innocent lives were lost. If the Council would not act, she would. Quietly, Saren left the Council chambers and made her way to the Alari fleet. Using her authority as a healer, she commandeered a small medical ship and set a course for the colony. She knew the risks. If the Council discovered her actions, she would be condemned. But she also knew she could not live with herself if she did nothing. As the stars streaked past her ship, Saren prepared herself for what lay ahead. She did not know if she could make a difference, but she had to try. For humanity, for the innocents caught in the crossfire, and for the ideals she believed the Alari should stand for. Saren's ship exited the wormhole into the chaos of the embattled human colony. From the viewport, she saw the brutal efficiency of the Exulthur fleet. Their sleek, obsidian ships moved in coordinated strikes, raining destruction down on the planet's surface. Plumes of smoke and fire rose into the atmosphere, painting a grim picture of humanity's struggle. The human defensive ships, outdated, outnumbered, and battered, fought valiantly but were no match for the Exulthur war machine. Saren's heart sank at the sight. Her Alari instincts urged her to avoid conflict, to find a peaceful solution, but she knew there was no time for diplomacy. The Exulthur would not stop until the colony was annihilated. She opened a channel to the human forces, hoping to make contact. "Human Defense Fleet, this is Saren of the Alari," she began, her voice calm but firm. "I am here to assist. Redirect your communications to my vessel and provide a status update." There was a brief pause before a harried voice responded. "This is Commander Elias Garrett of the Terran Defense Corps. Alari? We weren't expecting. Well, any help? What's your status?" Saren took a steadying breath. "I am a healer, not a soldier, but I have medical supplies and defensive capabilities. Direct me to where I can do the most good." Garrett's tone shifted, tinged with relief and skepticism. "We've got injured civilians in shelters on the northern continent. The Exulthur are targeting those areas. If you can reinforce the planetary shields, it might buy us some time." Saren nodded, though she doubted her small ship could make a significant difference against such overwhelming odds. Still, the Alari had advanced shielding technology that might bolster the human defenses. She diverted power to her ship's emitters and descended toward the planet's surface, navigating through the chaos. As she neared the shelters, the scale of the destruction became painfully clear. Entire cities lay in ruins, their once thriving populations reduced to scattered survivors. The shelters were makeshift structures, hastily constructed to protect civilians from orbital bombardments. Saren activated her ship's shield projectors, creating a protective dome over the largest shelter. She could see the frightened faces of humans below, staring up at her vessel with a mixture of awe and desperation. Landing her ship outside the shelter, Saren emerged, her translucent form shimmering under the planet's dim sun. The humans recoiled at first, unfamiliar with her species, but her calm demeanor and gentle gestures quickly put them at ease. She began tending to the injured, using Alari healing technology to stabilize those on the brink of death. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical, as she worked through the crowd, ignoring the chaos around her. The Exulthar were relentless. Saren could hear the distant rumble of their ground forces advancing. Her ship's shields held for now, but she knew it was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. The humans assisting her soldiers, medics, and even civilians were clearly exhausted, their faces etched with despair. Yet they continued to fight, to protect one another, to survive. One of the soldiers, a young woman named Elena, approached Saren as she treated an injured child. "I don't know how to thank you," Elena said, her voice trembling. "We didn't think anyone cared. The Council. They just watch as we die." Saren looked up, her expression unreadable. "The Council values peace above all else. But peace is meaningless if it comes at the cost of innocent lives." Elena nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "You're different. You came." Saren didn't respond. She couldn't afford to dwell on the council's inaction. Her focus remained on the task at hand. Yet Alina's words lingered, fueling the growing conflict within her. She had always believed in the Ilari way, in the power of nonviolence and neutrality. But here, surrounded by suffering, those beliefs felt hollow. The ground trembled as the Exulthar forces drew closer. Their ground troops were infamous across the galaxy, towering, heavily armored warriors bred for combat. Saren knew they would show no mercy to the humans. She activated a distress beacon, broadcasting a signal to any nearby ships. She didn't know if anyone would respond, but she had to try. As the first wave of Exulthar troops broke through the outer defenses, the human soldiers prepared for a desperate stand. Saren joined them, though she was unarmed. Instead, she used her healing abilities to keep the wounded in the fight, moving between soldiers with an efficiency born of years of experience. The humans fought valiantly, their resolve unshaken despite the overwhelming odds. The battle was brutal. The Selthar were relentless, their advanced weaponry cutting through the human ranks. Saren worked tirelessly, but the casualties mounted. For every life she saved, another was lost. She began to question whether her efforts were enough, whether she was truly making a difference. Then, amidst the chaos, her distress beacon received a response. A fleet of Aelari ships appeared in the sky, their sleek forms descending like beacons of hope. Saren's heart leapt. She hadn't expected reinforcements, especially not from her own people. The Aelari ships deployed advanced shielding technology, creating a barrier that slowed the Zelthar advance. Medical teams disembarked, joining Saren in treating the wounded. But the arrival of the Aelari was not without controversy. Lysera herself had led the fleet, her expression a mixture of determination and disapproval as she approached Saren. "What have you done?" Lysera demanded, her voice sharp. Saren met her gaze, unflinching. "I acted when the council would not. These people needed help." Lysera's eyes narrowed. "You've compromised our neutrality. The council will not forgive this." "Neutrality is meaningless if it allows atrocities to continue," Saren replied, her voice steady. "We cannot call ourselves protectors of peace if we ignore suffering." Lysera said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. She turned and joined the efforts to stabilize the situation, though it was clear she remained conflicted. The combined efforts of the humans and Aelari turned the tide of the battle. The Selthar, unprepared for the Aelari's intervention, began to retreat. As the last of their forces withdrew, a weary cheer rose from the human survivors. They had endured, but at a great cost. Saren stood amidst the wreckage, her mind heavy with the weight of what had transpired. She had defied the council, jeopardized her position, and shattered the Aelari's long-held principles. But as she looked at the survivors, humans and Aelari working side by side, she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of something greater, a new path for the Aelari and the galaxy as a whole. As dawn broke over the ravaged colony, the sky carried a bittersweet hue, a blend of hope and devastation. The Aelari fleet hovered above the planet like silent guardians, their shimmering hulls catching the faint rays of the rising sun. On the ground, survivors were beginning to piece together the remnants of their lives. The shelters were packed with wounded, both human and Aelari, while the air carried a mix of tension and relief. Saren moved among them, her translucent form glowing faintly in the morning light as she tended to the injured. The aftermath of the battle had left a heavy toll on everyone. The Aelari who had joined the fight, unused to such direct confrontation, were visibly shaken. Their once untouchable principles of nonviolence had been tested, and many struggled to reconcile their actions with the ideals they had sworn to uphold. For the humans, the losses were more familiar but no less painful. Families had been shattered, homes reduced to rubble, and an entire way of life irreparably altered. Saren moved with purpose through the chaos. She checked on injured soldiers, reassured frightened children, and coordinated efforts to stabilize the area. Despite her exhaustion, she pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that her people had finally acted. Yet even as she worked, she could feel the weight of disapproval from her own kind. Lysera, in particular, had been avoiding her since the battle ended, speaking only when necessary and with a clipped, distant tone. The silence between them was finally broken later that morning. Saren found Lysira standing at the edge of the largest shelter, staring out at the horizon where the last Exulthar ships had disappeared hours earlier. Lysira's shoulders were tense, her usually serene expression marred by a deep furrow between her brows. "You disobeyed the council," Lysira said without turning. Her voice was calm, but the undertone of anger was unmistakable. "I saved lives," Saren replied quietly. She stopped a few paces behind Lysira, her own exhaustion evident in the slight droop of her usually upright posture. "At what cost?" Lysira turned to face her, her crystalline eyes flashing with a rare intensity. "Do you understand what you've done? You've dragged the Alari into a war we swore to avoid. The Council will see this as a betrayal of everything we stand for." Saren met her gaze, unflinching. "And what do we stand for, Lysira? Watching from the sidelines while others suffer? Claiming moral superiority while entire species are annihilated? Is that the legacy we want to leave behind?" Lysira's jaw tightened. "You oversimplify. Our neutrality has preserved peace for millennia. By involving ourselves, we risk becoming just another faction in an endless cycle of violence." Saren stepped closer, her voice steady but impassioned. "Neutrality is not peace. It is inaction disguised as virtue. The Exulthar would have slaughtered every last person on this planet if we had done nothing. How can we claim to value life if we refuse to protect it?" Lysira's shoulders sagged slightly, the weight of her own conflicted thoughts evident. "And what now? The Council will demand answers. They may strip us of our positions, perhaps even exile us." "Then we'll face them together," Saren said firmly. "But I won't regret what we've done here. Look around you, Lysira. Humans and Alari working side by side, healing, rebuilding. This is what peace looks like, not words in a chamber, but actions that preserve life." Their conversation was interrupted by a call from Commander Elias Garrett. The human leader had requested a meeting to discuss the next steps, and both Saren and Lysira were expected to attend. Despite her reservations, Lysira followed Saren to the meeting, their shared sense of duty outweighing their personal disagreements. The command center was a hastily assembled structure in the ruins of a former government building. Garrett stood at the center of the room, flanked by his officers. His uniform was torn and stained, his face lined with fatigue, but his eyes held a spark of determination. He greeted the Alari with a nod, his gratitude evident despite the circumstances. "Thank you for coming," Garrett began, his voice rough but steady. "I wanted to express my gratitude for everything you've done. Without your help, we wouldn't be standing here right now." Lysira inclined her head, her response measured. "The Alari do not seek gratitude. Our actions were driven by necessity." Saren stepped forward, her tone softer. "What matters now is how we move forward. The Exulthar may have retreated, but they will return. We need to prepare." Garrett nodded grimly. "Agreed. Our defenses are in shambles, and we've lost too many lives to hold them off again on our own. We need allies." Lysira frowned. "The Alari cannot commit to a prolonged conflict. Our intervention here was an exception, not a precedent." Garrett's gaze shifted to Saren. "What about you? You've seen what we're up against. Do you believe humanity can stand a chance without help?" Saren hesitated, glancing at Lysira. The older Alari's disapproval was palpable, but Saren's resolve remained firm. Humanity has proven its resilience, but even the strongest cannot stand alone against the Exulthar. If the Council won't act, then perhaps it's time to rethink our alliances. Lysira's expression darkened, but she remained silent as the discussion continued. Plans were made to bolster the colony's defenses, with the Alari agreeing to provide limited support in the form of medical aid and shielding technology. It was a compromise, but one that left both sides unsatisfied. As the meeting ended, Saren lingered, her thoughts heavy. She knew that this was only the beginning. The Exulthar's retreat was a temporary reprieve, and the Council's response to the Alari's involvement would likely be severe. But as she looked at the humans around her, scarred but unbroken, she felt a glimmer of hope. Later that night, Saren found herself alone in the shelter, staring up at the stars. The weight of her actions pressed heavily on her, but she took solace in the knowledge that she had done what she believed was right. She had seen the best and worst of humanity, and she knew their survival was worth fighting for. Lysira approached quietly, her presence almost imperceptible. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Lysira broke the silence. You believe in them, she said softly. It was not a question, but a statement. I do, Saren replied. And I believe in us. We can do more than watch, Lysera. We can make a difference. Lysera sighed, her gaze fixed on the stars. Perhaps. But the path you've chosen is not an easy one. The Council will not forgive us for this. Then we'll face them together, Saren said again, her voice steady. Because peace is worth the risk. Lysera said nothing more, but the faintest trace of a smile crossed her lips before she turned and walked away. Saren remained where she was, her heart heavy but her resolve unshaken. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was ready to face them, one step at a time. The journey back to the Council of Harmony was filled with tension. The Ilari fleet moved through the void of space in absolute silence, its once pristine unity now fractured by unspoken doubts. The humans had bid farewell with heartfelt gratitude, their faces reflecting the deep bond that had formed in the fires of adversity. For the first time, many Ilari, including Lysera, had witnessed the human capacity for resilience, compassion, and courage. Yet this newfound respect was overshadowed by the looming confrontation with the Council. Saren sat in her quarters, gazing out at the swirling stars. Her translucent form shimmered faintly, mirroring the turmoil within her. She had spent her life upholding the ideals of peace and neutrality, but those principles now seemed hollow in the face of what she had witnessed. The memories of desperate human survivors, the gratitude in their eyes, and the lives she had saved were etched into her mind. She had no regrets, but she knew the road ahead would not be kind to her or her people. The council chamber on Ilari Prime was a masterpiece of serenity and order. Its walls, formed from natural crystals that resonated with soothing light, symbolized the harmony the council sought to maintain. Representatives from countless species gathered in the circular hall, their murmurs filling the space like a quiet storm. At the center, Lysera and Saren stood before the council's tribunal, their actions under scrutiny. High Mediator Altheron, an elder Ilari whose form glowed with an almost blinding intensity, presided over the proceedings. His voice, calm yet sharp, echoed through the chamber. Lysera and Saren, you stand accused of violating the principles of neutrality that have guided the Council for millennia. You allied with a species known for its violent tendencies and engaged in open conflict. Explain yourselves. Lysera bowed her head respectfully before stepping forward. Her voice was steady but laced with unease. High Mediator, the circumstances were extraordinary. This Elthar dominion posed an existential threat to an innocent colony, and our actions were not taken lightly but out of necessity. Lives were at stake. Altheron's crystalline gaze shifted to Saren. And you, Saren? You took it upon yourself to initiate this intervention, acting without the Council's consent. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done? Saren met his gaze without flinching. I do, High Mediator. I also understand the gravity of inaction. The Council's neutrality has preserved peace in theory, but in practice it has allowed atrocities to go unchallenged. I could not stand by while innocent lives were lost. If that is a betrayal of our principles, then so be it. The chamber erupted into murmurs, some voices raised in agreement, others in anger. The tension was palpable. Altheron raised a hand, silencing the room. Neutrality has been the foundation of our stability. To abandon it risks plunging the galaxy into chaos. Yet your actions have brought results we cannot ignore. This Elthar retreat, the survival of the colony, these are not insignificant. A representative of the Threnians, the reptilian species known for their strategic acumen, hissed in approval. The humans have potential. They fight with ingenuity and unity. Perhaps the Ilari's intervention was not without merit. Others were less forgiving. A Xerix delegate clicked its mandibles in disapproval. Intervention sets a dangerous precedent. If the Ilari abandon neutrality, what stops others from doing the same? The galaxy cannot afford such instability. As the debate raged, Saren felt a flicker of hope. For every voice raised against her, there was another in support. The humans' actions had left an undeniable impression, challenging the Council's long-held beliefs. Yet, she knew this was only the beginning. The Council's decision would shape the galaxy's future. After hours of deliberation, Altheron called for silence. The Council has weighed the evidence and arguments. While we cannot condone the violation of neutrality, we recognize the extraordinary nature of the situation. The Ilari's actions have revealed a flaw in our principles of failure to adapt to the realities of the galaxy. Saren held her breath as Altheron continued. Henceforth, the Council of Harmony will establish a task force dedicated to humanitarian intervention. This task force will act only in dire circumstances, with the approval of the Council. Saren, your actions have proven both the necessity and the danger of such measures. You will lead this initiative. Gasps filled the chamber. Saren's heart raced, her mind struggling to process the weight of Altheron's words. She had expected punishment, exile, perhaps even disgrace. Instead, she had been given a chance to change the galaxy. Lysira stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. High Mediator, I support this decision. Saren has shown courage and wisdom beyond measure. If we are to uphold the true spirit of peace, we must be willing to act. The resolution passed, though not without opposition. Many species remained wary of the precedent being set, but the tides of change had begun to shift. The Council, once rigid in its neutrality, was taking its first steps toward a more active role in the galaxy. As the chamber emptied, Saren found herself alone with Lysira. The older Ilari regarded her with a mixture of pride and resignation. You've done something remarkable, Saren, but this path will not be easy. The Council may have accepted this change, but there will be resistance, from within and beyond. I know, Saren replied quietly, but I'm ready. For the humans, for the Ilari, for all who need us, I'm ready. Lysira nodded, her expression softening. Then let us walk this path together. In the weeks that followed, Saren began assembling the task force. Humans and Ilari worked side by side, their collaboration a symbol of what could be achieved through unity. The scars of the Exalthar conflict remained, but so did the hope it had inspired. The final scene found Saren aboard her ship, gazing out at the stars once more. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, its challenges daunting. But for the first time, she felt a sense of purpose, a belief that peace was not a passive state but an active pursuit. As her ship set course for its next mission, she knew the road ahead would be fraught with trials. Yet, she also knew it was worth every step.